Hi, I'm Carten Cordell from Federal Times, and today we are talking about the White House's new executive order working on restructuring the executive branch and reducing the size of the federal civilian workforce. I'm joined by Terry Gerton, the president of the National Academy of Public Administration. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Carten. How are you?
Doing well. And talking about this order, the actual title of it is Comprehensive Plan for Reforming the Federal Government and Reducing the Federal Civilian Workforce. There's not a lot of mystery in that order right there. If you're a federal employee right now, what is your feeling on this? And effectively, should you be panicked?
Well, you should certainly not be panicking. I think the language of the memo is such that it lays out a very deliberate approach to restructuring the federal government. And so it takes into account the timelines, the processes. And so if you are a federal employee, the first thing you want to do is read this and get really familiar with the parameters, but there's no need to panic.
And looking at some of our reader comments right now, Don Moynihan has some questions about the possible mindset of the administration, what their strategy is. He says, what is their strategy for recruitment and workforce morale when he feels the president and agency heads are attacking agency missions? What do you think the administration's goals are in terms of trying to roll out this restructuring and work on efficiencies in the federal government?
Well, I think I take a little consolation from one of Mick Mulvaney's comments in his press conference last night, where he talked about this is not necessarily about smaller government, it's about better government. And the plan that this memorandum lays out really links agency reform and restructuring to the workforce planning and links that to the 2019 budget. So it offers a timeline really of the next 180 days and then on into discussions about the 2019 budget to allow agencies to build those plans and integrate them together so that as they're planning for the future, the workforce is properly aligned. From our perspective, it picks up a lot of the good workforce planning pieces that we and other sort of good government organizations have been arguing for quite a while.
In talking about the move itself, Director Mulvaney mentioned past administrations that had attempted to address reforming the civil service. Clinton and Reagan, most notably. Is there any kind of historic precedent, though, for a move like this made by the White House to completely overhaul the structure of public service?
Well, the situation that comes most closely to this, I think, from my perspective, is doing a base realignment and closure inside the Department of Defense, where you have a massive realignment of missions and functions, a geographical realignment, and with those comes a workforce alignment. And those are very, very deliberate processes. The workforce structure is put in place so that people who have options to retire can retire. People who are going to move with missions can move or have other placement alternatives. And it's a very deliberate process. That's what I see in the background here. And I'm encouraged when I read things like a Vera VSIP, where there's an early retirement option that they're going to extend to people so that folks who might be eligible to retire but haven't up till now can take advantage of that opportunity. It allows you to reshape deliberately and intentionally. There's things in here like examining your organizational structure to make sure that it meets the mission needs. And it provides then sort of the outlets for people who need to be off-ramped, but it's also, again, really deliberate. We're talking six months for the plan, but much longer in terms of the actual implementation, so that there shouldn't be any surprises to anybody in the workforce once this plan gets developed.
Now, we've had a lot of issues and discussion over the years about trying to engage more millennial talent, certainly more IT and cyber-friendly jobs. It seems like this plan could accelerate the change of pace in the federal government and reshape the face of the federal civilian workforce. Do you feel like that is a change that is going to be a catalyst made by this plan?
I think there's certainly a possibility for that. You see throughout the memo itself conversation around shared services, around IT modernization, around delivering services to constituents in a more efficient and automated way. So I think there's certainly an intent that as the plan gets rolling, as agencies submit their ideas for efficiencies, they should be thinking about how to take better advantage of technology and to do that in an effective way so that it meets their constituents' needs. But then they also want to shape the workforce appropriately rather than just sort of through mindless freezes or attrition in place. This really sets a stage where they can be very thoughtful about areas where they want to grow, areas where they want to shrink, moving people to the right places so that their talents are best utilized, but then providing some room at the bottom to bring in a new, younger workforce.
Now, we should also stress that this plan is not an across-the-board cut. Director Mulvaney noted yesterday that it's very closely tied in with the skinny budget that was released last month. If you are a federal employee who is weighing their options right now, whether it be retire or you're several years from retirement, what can you do to better acquaint yourself with this plan, interact any action on it moving forward?
Well, so I think there are a couple of things that you want to do. The first is read this plan itself so that you have a good idea of the framework. The second, and I would hope all agency leaders are taking this on, is that there needs to be a really open communications channel between the agency leadership and the folks that are planning these reorganizations and the workforce, so that there's a constant awareness on both parts kind of about where people are heading. And that's going to be far more productive than reading newspaper headlines and trying to divine the tea leaves, right? But the second is that members of the federal workforce should take advantage of the opportunities that they've been given through this plan to provide input and to be part of the conversation. There should be conversations going on inside agencies about what's best. And then over the summer, as the agency high-level plans get put in place and there are consultations with OMB, folks should stay tuned to those conversations so that they have an idea of what's coming down the pike. I think one of the things that makes this challenging for people to sort out right now is they don't even know what the rest of the FY17 budget's going to look like, much less the 18 budget, which has already sort of been thrown back and forth as a football between what was submitted as the skinny budget and what Congress's initial responses were to that, plus where they're going to be headed with the 19 budget. So there is that cloud of uncertainty around it. But I think folks, if they stay close to their agencies, between agency leaders and the workforce, keep an open channel of communication, it really will help to mitigate a lot of the angst that can surround these sorts of opportunities.
Well, and then finally, Director Mulvaney also mentioned that while this plan is born out of the executive branch and will largely begin with executive orders, to ultimately be a permanent change, it will need congressional approval and legislation. That's not something that's really come easy these days on any issue. What do you see in terms of Congress's approach to this, and how might their budget adjustments affect the overall plan?
Well, that's a great point. And sometimes the best laid plans sort of die on the steps of the Capitol, because we have to understand that congressional committees have certain jurisdiction over different agencies. And so if you're starting to approach agency realignments that change the boundaries of where agencies are or start to shift resources between them, Congress is going to have a lot to say about that. So my hope would be that OMB, certainly when they get the high-level plans in June, begins to start having conversations on the Hill about what the shape of those sorts of proposals are going to look like, and begin to get Congress's feedback, again, so that it's done in a collaborative fashion, no one is surprised, and the conversations can be constructive.
And then I guess checking in, final question with Mr. Moynihan again. He notes that the federal workforce is 1.94% of the entire workforce. Why does President Trump see fit to cut that further? Is it a matter of efficiencies?
Well, I think we need to be careful about a cut to the total workforce. I mean, President Trump has talked about growth in defense, growth in homeland security, growth in a number of agencies, and reductions in others. So it's hard to say what the total net effect is. And as we go through this process, I think there will be a look to say, well, if we're going to grow in defense, but we're shrinking somewhere else, is there an opportunity to move folks across agencies to fill what will be critical opportunities in another? So that interagency balance space is something that OMB says in the memo that they're going to take responsibility for and sort of broker as these plans come to fruition. So I think we should look carefully at movement across the federal government as the agency realignments take shape, and not just a net reduction.
Terry Gerton of the National Academy of Public Administration, I want to thank you for joining us today to talk about this new executive order.
My pleasure, Carten. Thanks so much.